Before Paul changed the world, Saul nearly destroyed it. Before Acts was a book, before Paul was an apostle, there was a man named Saul walking beneath the scorching sun, convinced he understood God. History remembers his fall in a burst of light, but almost nothing about the world that shaped him, or the 3 silent days that broke him open. This is the story behind the story, the truth hidden between the lines of Scripture. Not a retelling, but a reconstruction, pieced from history, culture, psychology, and the whispered clues left by ancient witnesses. We're not just reading Acts, we're stepping into the shadows behind it. Here, Saul is not a symbol. He's a son, a student, a zealot, a man fractured by faith and rebuilt by revelation. And as we traced his path from Tarsus to Damascus, we realized something. The greatest transformation in Christian history didn't begin with light. It began with doubt. What follows is the journey Paul never wrote down. The nights he paced alone, the faces he arrested, the tremor in his voice before Damascus, the breath before his eyes reopened. These moments shaped Acts more than any miracle. They shaped the man who shaped the world. Walk with us behind the pages into the fear, the fire, the silence, the struggle, and witness how the story truly began long before the ink of Acts ever touched parchment. Tarsus was never quiet. Greek voices clashed in the streets. Roman orders echoed off stone, and Jewish prayers rose at dawn. Saul grew up in that noise, the world pressing in from every side. Even as a child, he felt watched, not just by people, but by God, by history, by expectation he could not name. In the small house near the Jewish quarter, his mother's hands often rested on his head. She whispered blessings in Hebrew, her voice soft but steady. Saul did not understand every word, but he understood the feeling. Her eyes said he was meant for something. The thought comforted him and terrified him. His father's presence was different, firm, precise. A Pharisee who treated the law like breath itself. When Saul mispronounced a verse, correction came quickly, not with cruelty, but with sharpness. Each mistake felt like a crack in holiness. Saul learned early that to be loved was to be right. Roman soldiers passed their street in rigid lines of armor. Saul watched from the doorway, small fingers gripping the frame. They carried power in their silence. His father told him, "We are citizens too." Saul didn't fully grasp it, only that their family held something rare, a hidden shield in a dangerous world. Tarsus taught him that words held power. In the marketplace, Greeks argued about fate and virtue. Their boldness unsettled him. They spoke as if the gods were topics, not masters. Part of him admired their confidence. Another part recoiled. If they were wrong, their freedom was terrifying. At home, the law was not debated. It was received. Saul sat cross-legged on the floor, reciting passages until his throat ached. When he stumbled, shame burned his chest. Failure felt heavier than tiredness. At night, he promised himself he would be flawless tomorrow. Tomorrow rarely agreed. He noticed how other boys played loosely with rules, joking, cutting corners, laughing things off. Saul could not. Whenever he tried to relax, something inside tightened. What if God was watching? What if a careless word shifted his standing before heaven? He was too young for such thoughts, yet they never left. Sometimes, lying awake, he wondered if God expected more from him than from others. The idea made his heartbeat quicken. Why him? What had he done? The question had no answer. So he decided it must be duty. If God gave him more weight, he would learn to carry it. When elders praised his memory and sharpness, Saul felt pride. Guilt right behind it. Pride was sin. Guilt was a warning. He learned to bury the feeling quickly, answering compliments with careful humility. Yet, deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You are not like them. You must not fail." On certain evenings, his father took him to the synagogue. Saul loved the sound of scrolls being opened, the rustle like a living thing awakening. He watched the men lean in to hear the reading. He imagined one day standing there, voice firm, explaining the law to others. The thought sent a thrill through him. Still, doubt never vanished. When he saw older scholars argue over meaning, he wondered silently, what if I choose the wrong side? The fear of being wrong about God was worse than any earthly threat. It was safer to be strict, safer to be hard, safer to condemn than to risk compromise. Looking back, those early years in Tarsus were the furnace. A small boy, pressed by law, praise, fear, and expectation, was being forged into something sharp. Saul did not yet know he was becoming a weapon. He only knew this. Whatever God demanded, he would not be found half-hearted. Saul's name was chosen long before he understood its weight. Shaul, asked for, requested, given by God. His mother said he was her answered prayer. As a boy, he heard that story often. It made him feel chosen, but also trapped, like heaven expected repayment he didn't know how to give. When relatives spoke his name, they said it with a certain pride, as if God himself had answered their family. Saul carried that pride quietly, but sometimes in still moments he felt a pressure behind it. What if he wasn't the son they prayed for? What if he failed the meaning of his own name? He learned early of the first Saul, Israel's first king, chosen, anointed, then rejected. That story unsettled him. To be named after a fallen king felt like a shadow trailing behind him. Some nights he wondered if God had marked him for greatness or for breaking. Whenever elders retold the tale of King Saul's downfall, Saul listened more closely than the others. Disobedience, jealousy, impatience. Each failure sounded like a warning. He felt a strange kinship with that long-dead king, as if bearing his name meant inheriting his struggle. In Greek circles, his name became Saulos. The sound changed, but the meaning lingered: to walk proudly. Saul didn't see himself as proud, but whenever he stood straighter than the other boys or spoke too quickly, he feared the name was shaping him. Pride was the first step toward falling. They taught him. He hated whenever someone said he walked with too much certainty. He tried to shrink, to speak carefully, to avoid the impression of arrogance. But the harder he tried, the more his intensity betrayed him. His name followed him like a mirror he could never escape. Yet deep inside there were moments, rare, fleeting, when he wondered if maybe being asked for meant he was meant for something important. The thought made him nervous. Greatness was dangerous. Expectations even more so. Still, the idea flickered just enough to drive him harder. Later in life, when he would be called Paulus, small, humble, little one, Saul would understand what his early name never taught him. But for now, He lived under the weight of the old name, the heavy name, the name tied to a king who rose by God's hand and fell by his own. Growing up, Saul didn't fully grasp the irony. His name spoke of being desired, yet he felt constantly unworthy. His name spoke of being chosen, yet he feared rejection. His name spoke of pride, yet he buried himself in obedience. The contradictions carved him more than he realized. Only years later, after the desert light split his world open, would Saul finally understand the truth. His name was never a prophecy of who he was. It was the echo of who he needed to outgrow. Saul's youth unfolded beneath the heat of Tarsus, where every path felt like a test. Other boys played freely, chasing each other through markets. Saul watched them sometimes, wondering how they laughed without caution. Every joy he felt had to pass through the filter of, "Is this acceptable?" before he let himself feel it. He memorized scripture faster than most boys learned numbers. The rabbis praised his mind, but praise made him uneasy. Pride lurked behind every compliment. He feared it. He feared himself. The more talent he showed, the more pressure grew inside him. A silent weight he carried everywhere. Sometimes, standing in the synagogue, he watched older men debate interpretations of the law. Their voices clashed like steel. Saul admired their certainty. He longed to speak with such force, yet feared he might speak wrongly and offend the God he sought to honor. When he recited verses flawlessly, a rare smile crossed his father's face. Those moments lit something in Saul. Approval was addictive. Disapproval was unbearable. He learned quickly that perfection brought warmth, and anything less brought cold silence. He began to chase perfection like purpose. Greek tutors taught him rhetoric. Their boldness unsettled him. They questioned everything, even the gods. Saul envied their freedom but distrusted it. Doubt felt like sin to him. Yet when they spoke, he felt something stir inside, a curiosity he buried fast, afraid it would lead him astray. At 13, when he began deeper study, he felt a shift inside himself, as if childhood had ended early. He no longer saw himself as a boy. He felt like a soldier preparing for spiritual war. Every choice, every thought, every impulse had to be restrained and judged. Saul noticed early that other boys did not feel what he felt. They questioned rules, pushed boundaries, laughed loudly, flirted with danger. Saul couldn't. Inside him lived a constant whisper. Be better, be pure, be worthy. The whisper grew sharper each year. His temperament sharpened too. Teachers admired his quick answers and relentless discipline, but his intensity sometimes frightened them. He debated too fiercely, pushed too hard, clung too tightly to the law. Even then, the fire inside him burned hotter than in others. Despite his strictness, Saul had moments of gentleness he never admitted. When he saw beggars by the gate, something in him tightened, the desire to help, to comfort. But discipline demanded restraint. Compassion felt like softness. Softness felt like danger. So he buried kindness beneath duty. At night, lying on the rooftop under foreign stars, he often wondered why he felt different, why fear and devotion tangled so tightly inside him, why he worked harder than everyone else just to feel close to God. He never found answers, only resolve, If closeness required struggle, he would struggle harder. The elders watched him grow with interest. Some whispered that he would surpass his father. Others said he would be dangerous if not guided correctly. Saul heard none of this directly, but he sensed eyes following him, expecting things he did not yet understand. By the end of his youth, Saul had shaped himself into something rigid, disciplined, and fierce. He believed righteousness required hardness. He believed softness threatened holiness. And he believed that one day he would defend the law with every ounce of strength in him. What he did not know, what he could not know, was that the very fire shaping him now would one day break him open on a desert road. But for now he walked the world as a young man, certain of his path, unaware that his greatest transformation had already begun in the quiet corners of his youth. Jerusalem overwhelmed Saul the moment he arrived. The city breathed differently from Tarsus, older, louder, holier. Every stone felt heavy with stories he had yet to earn. As he walked its narrow streets, he felt small, like a guest stepping into the center of God's attention. Studying under Gamaliel felt like entering another world. The great teacher spoke with calm authority, drawing the law out like water from deep wells. Saul admired him instantly. Gamaliel carried certainty without harshness, wisdom without ego. Saul wanted that balance, but feared he would never achieve it. His days became strict rhythm: dawn prayers, scripture recitation, debate, meal, debate again, meditation, study, sleep. Saul clung to the routine. Structure steadied him. Without it, his mind spun wildly, always worrying whether he pleased God enough, understood enough, obeyed enough. The classroom was alive with argument. Students challenged each other like warriors crossing blades. The debates thrilled Saul, but deeper still was the fear that one wrong interpretation could lead someone astray. He fought to be exact, to speak only what he was certain God approved. He studied with men older, taller, more confident. Their voices boomed across the room. Saul's voice started soft, but intensity strengthened it. He didn't want to dominate. He wanted truth. Yet the harder he spoke for truth, the more his classmates backed away, startled by his fire. At night, Saul reviewed every word he said during the day. He replayed arguments, searching for pride hidden in his tone. He feared pride more than fatigue. Pride was the downfall of the first Saul. His name reminded him constantly. One misstep could unravel everything. Sometimes he watched Gamaliel listening quietly while others argued fiercely. The older man's patience stirred something complicated in Saul, admiration mixed with envy. How could someone hold truth gently? Saul held truth like a sword. Gamaliel held it like a lamp. The more Saul learned, the more pressure he felt. Knowledge was not comfort. It was responsibility. Every new insight meant a new rule to obey, a new danger to avoid, a new path to guard. He often wondered if anyone else felt the law this heavily. Yet he excelled. His memory was a weapon, his reasoning sharp, his dedication unmatched. Even older students grudgingly respected him. Teachers whispered that he was a prodigy. Saul heard them accidentally once and felt both pride and dread twist inside him. Jerusalem's atmosphere transformed him. The temple's grandeur stirred awe. The debates sharpened him. The expectations shaped him. Each day, he felt more convinced that God required something from him. Something total, something consuming, something no one else seemed willing to give. But there were quiet moments when he worried that his intensity made him dangerous. Sometimes compassion stirred in him, only to be smothered by discipline. He suspected that mercy and purity could not live together. So he chose purity, believing God would prefer him unwavering. Saul watched the city with wary eyes. False teachings, rebellious sects, Greeks tempting minds, Romans tempting compromise. His training made him vigilant. Every threat to the law felt personal, like a rival challenging the purpose he had crafted since childhood. By the end of his schooling, Saul had become exactly what the teachers wanted and perhaps feared. Brilliant, disciplined, fierce. A young man who believed God's favor depended on perfect obedience. The world around him seemed fragile, constantly needing to be defended. He walked the streets of Jerusalem with a sense of mission forming, not yet defined, not yet spoken, but burning quietly behind his stern eyes. Saul didn't know it then, but this fire would soon be pointed at the followers of a crucified teacher he still believed was a threat. Saul's rise did not begin with a single moment. It built slowly, like pressure inside a sealed jar. Each debate he won, each interpretation he defended, each rebuke he delivered with precision. These formed the quiet staircase toward influence. He didn't chase power, but power noticed him. The elders watched him. Some admired his discipline, others his fearlessness. When he spoke as if every word mattered, as if heaven itself leaned in to listen. That kind of conviction made others uneasy, yet they couldn't deny its force. Saul never thought of himself as rising. He thought of himself as guarding the law from distortion, guarding Israel's identity, guarding the path laid before him. What others saw as ambition, he saw as duty, a duty sharp enough to cut through distraction or doubt. He gained a reputation, young, relentless, incorruptible. Students older than him hesitated to challenge him in debate. When they did, Saul didn't aim to embarrass them, but his intensity often overwhelmed them. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to protect truth. Leaders of the Pharisees began inviting him into private discussions. For a young student, this was rare. Saul entered these rooms with silent awe, sitting straighter, listening harder. He watched how influence moved, carefully, quietly, through those who could enforce conviction. Saul carried scrolls for the elders during temple meetings. Though it seemed like a small task, it placed him close enough to hear every whispered concern. False teachings spreading, unrest among common people, rumors of sects forming around a crucified man from Nazareth. Each whisper tightened something inside him. To Saul, the law was a fragile flame in a storm. Anything that threatened it felt like betrayal, not just of tradition, but of God himself. He didn't hate these new followers, not yet, but he feared what they represented, a crack in certainty. His clarity drew attention. Even men twice his age asked his opinion on certain matters. Saul answered cautiously, but firmly. He was not arrogant. He simply believed conviction was safer than compromise. And every answer he gave revealed the shape of the man he was becoming. Rumors circulated that he would soon be entrusted with greater responsibility. Saul heard them and dismissed them. He cared nothing for titles. He wanted righteousness, not recognition. But inside, a quiet fire flickered. The sense that God was preparing him for something fierce. Sometimes, walking home after long debates, he imagined what it would be like to defend the law beyond the classroom, to take what he knew into the streets, into the synagogues, into the lives of people drifting toward falsehood. The thought filled him with both excitement and fear. He knew he lacked something all certainty on the outside, but a trembling need for approval inside. He wondered if God accepted him. He wondered if strictness made him righteous or imprisoned, but he never voiced these thoughts. Doubt felt like treason. By now, people spoke Saul's name with weight. Not admiration alone, expectation. He felt it when he walked into the temple. He felt it in the way elders nodded at him. He felt it in his chest, a knot tightening with every passing year. Saul didn't understand fully what he was rising toward. He only knew this: if danger approached the law, he would be the one to stand in the way. Conviction had become his armor. Certainty had become his shield. And the world was already shifting toward the moment when both would be tested. The first arrest did not come with ceremony. It came quietly, like a test hidden inside an ordinary day. Saul had been summoned by elders whose faces held a seriousness he had never seen before. Their voices were low, heavy, as they spoke of a man spreading dangerous teachings in the lower district. "This one is small," an elder murmured, "barely a threat." But Saul's chest tightened. If a man's influence was small now, it could grow. He had seen ideas spread like fire. He felt a pull inside him, fear mixed with duty. If God's law was fragile, then hesitation was betrayal. They handed him the order. His fingers trembled slightly as he unrolled it. He'd studied the law for years, defended it in words, fought for it in debate. But this was different. This was the first time he would enforce it with his hands. The weight of that difference sank into him like a stone. As he walked through Jerusalem's narrow alleys, he rehearsed the scriptures that justified his task. Purge the evil, protect the flock, guard the covenant. He whispered them under his breath, not to convince others, but to silence the faint trembling inside his chest. The man they sought lived near the outer quarter, where stone houses leaned against each other like tired shoulders. Saul expected resistance, argument, panic, but when the door opened, the man simply froze, eyes wide, as if he knew the moment had always been coming. He did not fight. He did not plead. He only whispered, "I follow the way." Saul felt a chill, sharp and immediate. The phrase meant nothing to most, but Saul had heard whispers, people speaking of a teacher from Nazareth, a crucified man whose followers insisted he still lived. Saul pushed the thought aside. Lies grew best in the shadows of emotion. He bound the man's hands. The ropes felt rough against Saul's own fingers. The man winced once, but offered no resistance. That disturbed Saul more than defiance would have. The calmness hinted at conviction, a conviction that threatened everything Saul stood for. As they walked him through the street, neighbors watched in silence. Some whispered, some stared with pity. Saul kept his eyes ahead, jaw tight. Compassion tried to surface, but he crushed it quickly. Compassion softened the law. Softness led to ruin. The man spoke once more. "You think you're serving God," he said quietly, "but you're hurting the ones he's calling." The words hit Saul with unexpected force. His steps faltered for a moment. A flush rose to his face. It felt like accusation, like exposure. He tightened his grip on the rope. He delivered the man to the council chambers. The elders nodded approvingly. Saul should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt strangely hollow, as if something inside him had shifted out of place. He recited the law again under his breath, steadying himself. Later that night, lying on his sleeping mat, Saul replayed the man's calm expression. Not defiance, peace. That bothered him. Peace belonged to the obedient. Peace belonged to the righteous. How could a heretic possess it? The confusion gnawed at him. He tried to reassure himself. I did what was right. I protected the truth. But the sentence felt thin, like parchment stretched too tight. He turned onto his side, restless. This was supposed to feel holy, strong, righteous. Instead, he felt unsettled, as if he had crossed a line he could not name. Still, he told himself he had done God's will. That thought steadied him enough to sleep. But deep beneath the surface, something had awakened, something small, something quiet, but something that would grow. The seed of Paul had been planted in the soil of Saul's certainty. Night settled over Jerusalem, but Saul's mind refused to rest. He lay on his mat, listening to distant footsteps echo against stone. The chamber felt too small, too quiet. His thoughts pressed in tightly, replaying every moment of the arrest like a scene he couldn't escape. He had expected satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment. The elders' approval should have calmed him. Instead, unease twisted in his stomach. The man's peaceful expression haunted him. Those steady eyes, unafraid, almost pitying. Saul turned onto his back, staring into darkness. He whispered scripture to steady himself. Verses he knew by heart, commands of obedience, promises of protection. Yet each line sounded thinner tonight, as if the words couldn't root themselves in him the way they once did. His voice shook despite his effort to control it. The man's final words replayed again. "You're hurting the ones he's calling." Saul clenched his jaw. Lies, he told himself. Deception, emotional manipulation. But the phrase slipped past his defenses and struck something he didn't know was fragile. What if the man believed it? What gave him such certainty? Saul reminded himself of King Saul, the first Saul, whose downfall began when he listened to the wrong voice. He would not repeat that mistake. He would not be swayed by softness. He pressed his palms together tightly, as if trying to crush doubt with sheer force. Still, his heartbeat would not settle. He kept seeing the man's hands bound with rope, the slight tremble when Saul pulled too tightly, the moment their eyes met. A strange heaviness filled Saul's chest, like guilt, though he refused to name it. Guilt implied wrongdoing, and he had done nothing wrong. The moonlight slipped across the floor, revealing dust drifting through the air. Saul watched it, wishing his thoughts would settle as gently. Instead, they stormed. He wondered silently why obedience felt different tonight, why righteousness didn't warm him like before. He sat up, elbows on his knees, breathing slowly. His teacher Gamaliel often said wisdom was found in quiet reflection. But reflection only sharpened Saul's confusion. If he had defended the law correctly, why did the task feel heavier than truth? He tried to imagine the man he arrested. Alone now, accused, possibly beaten. Yet Saul remembered his calm, the way he whispered, the way, as if it meant everything. Saul didn't understand it, but he envied that certainty. His own certainty felt fragile tonight. Saul lay back again, squeezing his eyes shut. He tried to banish the question rising in him, but it persisted. Why didn't the man fear me? Why didn't he fear death? What did he know that I don't? Saul hated the question. It made him feel small. He wondered briefly, shamefully, what if righteousness wasn't as simple as punishing those who threatened tradition? The thought frightened him. If the path was more complicated, he would lose the clarity he clung to, and clarity was his anchor, his identity, his armor. By the time dawn crept into the sky, Saul had not slept. His chest was tight, his thoughts raw, but he made it driven not by peace but by fear of weakness. If one arrest shook him this deeply, he would become stronger, harder, more certain. He stood weary but determined. Doubt had tried to touch him in the night. He would not allow it again. With exhaustion burning behind his eyes, Saul vowed to silence every voice, including his own, that threatened the path he believed God demanded. Word spread quickly. There were more of them than anyone realized. Small gatherings in dim rooms, whispered prayers, quiet songs spoken in the name of the crucified teacher. Saul heard the reports, one after another, each one tightening something inside him. His uneasiness from the first arrest hardened into purpose. The council summoned him again. Their faces were grave, but their eyes held expectation. This must be contained, one said. Before it grows, Saul nodded, masking the restless tremor beneath his ribs. If peace had betrayed him that night, certainty would steady him now. He was given names. Not many at first, just a small list written with careful ink. The parchment felt heavier than it should. Each name represented a life he had never met. Yet he felt the pressure of responsibility, as if God himself handed it to him. He left the chamber with the list clutched tightly. The streets of Jerusalem seemed narrower, sharper, as though the city itself watched him. His lack of sleep lingered, making everything too bright, too loud, but the mission steadied him. If doubt struck him in private, he would defeat it in action. The first house was modest. A clay lamp flickered behind a worn curtain. Saul knocked firmly, heart pounding harder than he expected. When the door opened, he saw fear bloom in the woman's eyes. The moment she recognized his clothing, his posture, his purpose. For a brief moment, compassion pushed against him, rising like an instinct deeper than training, but he crushed it fast. Compassion confused judgment. Hesitation endangered truth. He stepped inside with authority, searching the small room until he found the believer, a man clutching a scroll to his chest. The man didn't run. He didn't fight. He only whispered. We were praying. The calmness struck Saul again, a painful echo of the first arrest. Peace in the wrong place felt like rebellion. He bound the man's hands and led him into the street. As neighbors peered from behind their shutters, Night after night, Saul returned to the list. Each house blurred into the next. Lamps, whispers, trembling hands, silent prayers. The more resistance he saw, the more relentless he became, not because he hated them, but because he feared what softness inside him might become if he stopped. But something unexpected happened. With each arrest, he felt less certain. Doubt didn't weaken, it waited, quietly, patiently. It surfaced when he saw mothers shielding children with their bodies, when he heard elderly men pray for him, not against him, when believers sang through cracked voices as he dragged them away. Yet he moved forward, driven by duty. He reminded himself, if these people were wrong, they led others astray. If he hesitated, falsehood would spread. God demanded purity. Purity demanded action. He repeated this until the words numbed him enough to keep going. Some nights he returned home drained, exhausted from holding himself together. He washed his hands slowly, as if cleansing away something invisible. The list grew shorter, but his chest grew tighter. He wondered why obedience felt heavier with each name crossed out. But as the arrests increased, so did the council's approval. They saw a young man doing what others feared, a defender, a purifier, a protector of tradition. Their praise pushed Saul forward like a hand on his back, keeping him from turning around. By the time he reached the final name on the list, Saul no longer saw individuals. He saw threats. He saw cracks in the law, holes in the wall he had sworn to guard. The fire inside him burned hotter now, fiercer, more desperate. He believed he was saving Israel. What he didn't understand was that the relentless pursuit, this house-to-house cleansing, was not strength. It was the beginning of collapse. His fury wasn't righteousness. It was the echo of fear he refused to confront. And that fear would follow him all the way to Damascus. The list did not appear all at once. It grew slowly. Name after name gathered from whispers in markets, reports from synagogues, and quiet warnings from families afraid of losing their own. Saul did not know who first compiled it, only that the council treated it like a map of infection, spreading through Jerusalem. When they handed it to him, Saul expected clarity. Instead, the parchment felt strangely alive in his hands, as if each name carried a heartbeat. He studied the ink, imagining faces, homes, lives he had never seen. A strange heaviness filled him, responsibility mixed with an unease he refused to acknowledge. He convinced himself this list was mercy, not punishment, a tool to stop confusion before it grew, a way to protect Israel from corruption. He repeated these thoughts until his chest loosened. If he hesitated, he feared he might see people instead of threats, and that would weaken the mission. Each name came with a short description. Speaks of the Nazarene, hosts gatherings, teaches the way, refuses to recant. The phrasing was careful, clinical. Saul appreciated the precision. Emotions complicated righteousness, but ink stayed steady, loyal, unfeeling. Still, when he traced the first name with his thumb, something flickered inside him. A simple name, Elias, no title. No rebellion documented, just a man who prayed differently. Saul inhaled sharply. The simplicity bothered him. A threat should be clear, loud, unmistakable. Not an ordinary man with an ordinary name. He reminded himself that false teachings began quietly. Great dangers often started as whispers. Elias might be harmless now, but what he carried could spread. The memory of the peaceful first arrest pushed Saul forward. Peace in the wrong place was the most dangerous thing of all. Saul memorized a list quickly. He didn't need to, but something in him demanded complete mastery. Mistakes invited chaos. Forgetting even one name felt like opening a door for corruption to walk through. His precision was not pride, it was fear disguised as discipline. At night he studied the parchment by lamplight, reading each name until the letters blurred. He tried imagining them speaking, praying, teaching. The images unsettled him. He did not want to humanize them. Human faces made judgment harder to carry. When he closed his eyes, he saw not threats, but people. Mothers, sons, elderly men with trembling hands. That vision angered him at himself. Compassion tried to push through the cracks in his certainty. He slammed them shut, convincing himself compassion for heretics was betrayal of the law. By the third night, the list felt burned into him. He knew their names like scripture: Elias, Miriam, Josiah, Lysanias, Damaris, and others. Each name became a task, a responsibility, a weight he believed God required him to shoulder. Yet beneath his growing zeal, something else stirred. A quiet, buried question. Why do they believe so strongly? What are they seeing that he isn't? He pushed the thought away violently. Doubt was rot. Even thinking it felt like letting poison into his own faith. The list became Saul's world. A set of targets he convinced himself were threats. He walked the streets holding the parchment like a compass. Each house he approached, each name he called out, hardened him further. Righteousness became indistinguishable from intensity. What he never realized was that every name on that list carried a story, a wound, a reason. He never asked. Asking felt dangerous. If he understood them, he feared he might hesitate. So he chose ignorance, believing ignorance was strength. The list would shape him more than any teacher had. It would lead him through alleys, into homes, into lives, and into questions he'd buried for years. With every name crossed out, Saul felt he was drawing closer to purpose, yet farther from peace. Later, long after everything changed, Paul would remember these names, not as enemies, not as criminals, but as the first faces that unknowingly began cracking his certainty, name by name, thread by thread. Elias was the first name on the list Saul could not ignore, not because he was dangerous, but because everything about him contradicted Saul's expectations. No rebellion, no defiance, just a quiet man known for kindness, and long hours working leather in a humble workshop near the southern gate. Saul approached the shop at dusk. The air smelled of oil and stretched hide. Elias stood bent over his work, hands steady, unaware of the footsteps entering behind him. Saul expected guilt or fear. Instead, Elias lifted his eyes calmly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You are Saul," Elias said softly, not accusing, not trembling, simply naming the truth. Saul's heartbeat quickened. People usually feared him on sight. This calmness unsettled him. It felt like the same unsettling peace from earlier arrests, but stronger, directed at him like a question he couldn't answer. "I follow the command of the council," Saul declared. voice firm to hide the shift inside his chest. Elias nodded gently, as if Saul had spoken something obvious. "And I follow the one who called me." The phrase struck Saul like a blow. Again, that word called. Again, that certainty he could not understand. Saul ordered him to turn around. Elias obeyed immediately. There was no resistance, no anger, only a silent acceptance that made Saul feel exposed. It was easier to bind men who fought. This quiet surrender forced Saul to confront his own trembling hands. As Saul tied the rope, Elias whispered, "You think this is strength." The words froze Saul. The room seemed to dim around him. He tightened the knot too quickly, trying to silence the echo those words created inside him, because they felt painfully accurate. Elias turned his head slightly, enough for their eyes to meet. Strength without mercy becomes fear wearing armor. The sentence cut deeper than any argument Saul had faced in the classroom. It bypassed logic and struck something raw inside him, a truth he feared acknowledging. Saul shoved the thought aside, pulling Elias outside. But the man walked steadily, almost supporting Saul's shaken breath rather than being dragged. Children watched from doorways. Women whispered prayers, not for Elias, Saul realized, but for him. That realization twisted sharply through him. Halfway to the council chamber, Elias spoke again. "Saul, you don't see us as we are. You see shadows of danger where there is only hunger for God." Saul's jaw tightened. "Your teachings corrupt Israel." Elias shook his head gently. "No, they are healing her." Saul felt anger flare, anger born from fear, not certainty. At the chamber entrance, Elias paused. "One day, Saul, you will see the one you fight against." Saul snapped. "Enough." But something inside him cracked at those words. He didn't know why, only that the idea of seeing the one he opposed filled him with dread he could not explain. As Elias was taken inside, Saul stood outside for a moment longer, breathing hard. He felt like he had been struck, not physically, but in the place where certainty lived. His hands shook slightly. He clenched them into fists behind his cloak so no one would see. Later that night, Saul replayed Elias' eyes, calm, steady, sorrowful. He had seen fear in many faces, anger in some, but never sorrow for him. Elias had not spoken like an enemy. He had spoken like a man grieving something Saul didn't understand. For the first time, Saul wondered if the danger wasn't Elias or the others, but something inside himself, a thought too dangerous to entertain for more than a breath. So he buried it under zeal, telling himself conviction must grow sharper, harder, unbreakable. But the crack remained, and Elias' final words, "You will see the one you fight against," would follow him long after the list was finished, echoing quietly in the corners of his mind, waiting for the desert road where prophecy would meet him in blinding light. On the surface, Saul looked stronger than ever. His steps were firm, his voice sharp, his orders executed without hesitation. People watched him with a mix of fear and admiration. But inside, something had begun to splinter quietly, painfully, like a crack forming beneath polished stone. The more he acted with certainty, the more doubt gnawed at him in secret. He prayed harder, studied longer, spoke more fiercely, trying to drown the restless questions rising from somewhere deep inside. Zeal became a shield, a heavy one, one he lifted every day with trembling hands. After each arrest, he returned home with the same ritual, washing his hands slowly as if cleansing something invisible. His breath often shook, though he hid it. He told himself it was exhaustion, but he knew exhaustion alone didn't make a man stare at his reflection and feel a stranger looking back. He carried the list everywhere, the parchment thinning at the edges from constant handling. It felt like a lifeline and a burden. When his fingers traced the names, part of him felt righteous. Another part felt hollow, like he was erasing faces he had never taken time to understand. At night he lay awake, hearing the echoes of voices he had silenced. Their calmness haunted him more than their words. He'd expected anger, fear, maybe curses. Instead, he heard prayers, some for him, not against him. Those prayers pierced him in places he could not name. He tried to crush compassion whenever it rose, believing it was weakness disguised as kindness. But compassion persisted. It surfaced at the worst moments, when he bound trembling hands, when he saw mothers shielding children, when believers whispered blessings instead of resistance. Each time compassion appeared, he countered it with more zeal, harder words, faster action, fiercer devotion. He believed intensity could cleanse his heart. Instead, it made the fracture widen. His certainty no longer flowed from clarity. It flowed from fear of collapsing completely. Gamaliel noticed the change. "You burn too hot," he warned one evening. Saul bowed respectfully, but inside he recoiled. Burn too hot? Heat was strength. Heat was purity. Heat was the weapon God used to refine. But alone that night, Saul wondered if fire could also destroy the vessel that held it. He began dreaming of faces from the list. He saw Elias standing in the dim workshop, whispering, "Strength without mercy becomes fear wearing armor." Saul would wake abruptly, breath shallow, convinced he had heard the words anew. Each dream left him trembling. During prayers, his mind wandered. He struggled to focus. He tried reciting verses faster, louder, more fiercely, hoping passion would drown the inner noise. But the words felt different now, like they passed through him instead of grounding him. Saul started avoiding certain streets, not because of danger, but because he feared seeing familiar eyes, the eyes of those he had taken. Their memories pressed against him like invisible hands, soft but persistent. He hated that softness more than opposition. In the synagogue, some elders praised his commitment. Their approval steadied him like a drug, but the praise also tightened his chest. He felt trapped between what they expected of him and what his heart quietly, privately feared, that he was no longer certain why he was doing any of this. One night, while studying alone, the scrolls blurred before his eyes. He pressed his palms against the table, trying to stop the trembling in his arms. A terrifying thought surfaced. What if this isn't strength? What if this is desperation? He slammed his fist onto the floor to silence it. But the question wouldn't die. It lingered in the corners of his mind, waiting for moments of quiet to strike. Saul hated silence now. Silence made room for truth, and truth might reveal the thing he feared most, that his zeal was no longer obedience, but an attempt to outrun the collapse happening inside him. By the time dawn broke, Saul's heart felt like a battlefield. He refused to admit weakness. He refused to acknowledge the fracture widening beneath him, so he did the only thing he knew. He rose, steeled his jaw, and doubled his zeal, not knowing the collapse would meet him soon on a road he could not avoid. The decree came at dusk, a letter granting Saul authority to pursue believers beyond Jerusalem, beyond familiar streets, beyond the reach of those who might question him. When he accepted the scroll, something inside him tightened, half triumph, half dread, like a door closing quietly behind him. The council praised him openly. "Your zeal protects Israel." The words should have steadied him. Instead, they pressed against the fracture deep in his chest. He bowed respectfully, hiding the way his heartbeat stuttered. Zeal looked powerful on the outside, but inside it felt like a man running from himself. Walking home with a decree in hand, Saul felt the weight of the city shift around him. People moved aside, some in respect, others in fear. He kept his head high, but a quiet thought flickered. When did fear become the proof of righteousness? He crushed the thought quickly. In his room that night, Saul unrolled the letter again. The ink glistened faintly, spelling out permission, no expectation. He traced the words with steady fingers, pretending the firmness of his hand meant the firmness of his heart. But the truth trembled beneath his skin. He tried praying. The words felt heavy, as if they were dragging through mud on their way out. "Guide me," he whispered. "Strengthen me." Each plea echoed strangely, as though bouncing off walls inside him that he didn't know existed. The room felt too quiet, too spacious, too honest. Saul's breaths came unevenly. Images from the past weeks rose unbidden. Elias' calm eyes, the whispered blessings, mothers clutching children, the peace of those he had condemned. They swirled through his mind like ghosts. He stood abruptly, pacing the small floor. Movement steadied him. Stillness threatened to unravel him. Every few steps he clenched his fists, willing certainty to return. But certainty refused to obey him the way his body did. His heart had begun a rebellion he couldn't suppress. Saul remembered the first arrest, the sleepless night that followed, the quiet prayer of a man he dragged away. He felt the same unease now, multiplied, deepened, sharpened. It was as if every unresolved doubt had gathered to confront him before the journey. He tried to picture Damascus, its synagogues, its streets, its leaders waiting for him. The thought filled him with a strange mix of anticipation and fear. If he succeeded, he would protect the faith. If he hesitated, he didn't know what he would become. He whispered to himself, "This is righteous. This is necessary." But the words rang hollow. They were mantras now, not convictions. Repeated so often they lost meaning. He pressed his palms to his eyes, trying to will back the fire that once burned so easily. A sudden memory struck him, Elias' voice. "You will see the one you fight against." Saul shivered. Not from cold, but from something deeper, something close to fear. He hated the fear. Fear made him human. Humans faltered. Humans sinned. Humans fell. He was supposed to be stronger. He knelt on the floor, forehead touching stone. It was not humility, it was desperation. "Purify my heart," he whispered. "Remove weakness." but he felt no answer, only the faint throb of his own pulse echoing through the silence, like a reminder he couldn't escape. As hours passed, the weight inside him grew unbearable. He needed motion. He needed purpose. He needed something to drown the noise inside him. The letter to Damascus became his anchor. A task, a direction, a mission that let him run without thinking. He packed slowly scrolls, robes, sandals, provisions. Each item folded neatly, ritualistically. Precision calmed him. Order disguised turmoil. By the time he tied his cloak, he felt numb enough to believe he was ready. Before dawn, he stepped outside. The city slept, unaware that one of its fiercest guardians was crumbling in silence. Saul looked toward the road, the faint line of the horizon, waiting. He ignored the tremor in his hands and whispered to himself one last lie. This will restore me. He didn't know that the road ahead would not restore him. It would break him open, and in the breaking, the man called Paul would begin to breathe. The road unwound before Saul in a long curve of dust and heat. Morning light washed the hills in pale gold, the kind of quiet beauty he rarely noticed. Today he noticed nothing but the weight of the mission, the deeper weight of himself, and the companions walking beside him in uneasy silence. He traveled with a small group, dedicated men, loyal to the council, loyal to the law. They respected Saul, though they did not understand him. His intensity intimidated them. They followed his lead without question, unaware that inside him, certainty felt thinner than the dust beneath their sandals. Saul kept to the front, walking faster than necessary. Movement kept his mind from collapsing inward. Each step felt like he was outrunning something behind him. Questions, memories, tremors of regret he refused to name. The road was long, but not long enough to escape himself. Heat rose from the earth in shimmering waves. Sweat trickled down Saul's neck, but he welcomed the discomfort. Pain sharpened him. Softness weakened him. The desert tested every man who crossed it, and today Saul felt like the desert was testing his soul more than his body. His companions spoke quietly behind him. Snippets of conversation drifted forward, questions about the mission, about the believers in Damascus, about the rumors of miracles. Saul listened without reacting. Miracles. He hated that word. Miracles implied God favored them. He remembered Elias' prophecy, "You will see the one you fight against." The words returned like an echo carried on the dry wind. Saul quickened his pace, jaw tightening. Prophecies were dangerous. They planted ideas. Ideas planted doubt. And doubt for Saul felt like betrayal. The road forked briefly, then rejoined. Saul barely noticed. His thoughts had turned inward, walking paths older than the road itself. Images flashed, faces he arrested, prayers whispered as he dragged people away, children staring with wide, confused eyes. He hated how clearly he remembered them. He tried praying again, silently, "Strengthen me." But the prayer felt fragile, as if spoken through cracked glass. Heaven felt distant, unreachable. For the first time, he wondered if zeal had carried him away from God instead of toward him. The thought frightened him more than any enemy could. His companions occasionally tried to speak with him, but Saul answered curtly, He could not appear uncertain. Weakness would unravel him. Leadership demanded steadiness, and he had none to spare. So he walked in silence, holding his identity together with clenched teeth. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The air grew heavy. Shadows shrank beneath their feet. Saul felt a pressure building in the sky, like the calm before a storm. He had felt this kind of heaviness only once before, on the night before the first arrest. The closer they drew to Damascus, the more Saul felt something inside him recoil, as if his soul knew what his mind refused to see. Each step grew heavier, yet he forced himself forward. Duty demanded it. The law required it. His identity depended on it. To his left, a caravan passed, merchants guiding camels, dust billowing behind them. One of them glanced at Saul with an expression he couldn't decipher. Concern? Warning? Recognition? Saul looked away. He did not like the feeling that strangers could see through him more clearly than he saw through himself. The road leveled out. Damascus shimmered faintly in the distance, its walls blurred by heat. Saul inhaled deeply, as if bracing his chest for impact. The city represented victory, completion, restoration. If he succeeded, maybe the turmoil inside him would finally quiet. His companions murmured, "Almost there," one said. Saul nodded but said nothing. His eyes were fixed ahead, but his mind churned. The truth was simple and terrifying. He was terrified of what waited in Damascus. Not the believers, not the mission, but the confrontation with himself. He took one more step, and then the sky exploded. Not with sound, but with light. A brilliance so violent, so sudden, that the world vanished beneath it. Saul gasped as if struck in the chest. His knees buckled. His vision shattered into white fire. He heard his companions crying out, falling, stumbling. But the light didn't belong to the sky. It felt personal, directed, alive. A presence he had feared without knowing it, calling him by force, flooding the cracks he'd spent years refusing to acknowledge. Saul fell completely to the ground, face pressed into the dust. His heart pounded wildly. Every breath felt like lightning in his lungs. The weight of the light crushed him, not to destroy him, but to expose him. And then a voice unlike any he had ever heard, pierced through the fire with a single question that would tear his world apart. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" The light did not descend. It erupted, swallowing the road, the sky, the air, and every thought in Saul's mind. It wasn't sunlight. It wasn't lightning. It felt like the world itself had cracked open, revealing something behind it, something he had feared without knowing its name. Saul gasped as the blast struck him. His vision shattered into white agony. The force tore his breath away. He wasn't standing anymore. The ground rushed up and hit him hard, dust filling his mouth. His hands clawed at the earth, searching for anything real. His companions screamed. Some fell to their knees, others stumbled backward. One shielded his face with both arms. They all saw the light, but none of them felt it the way Saul did. To them it was terrifying. To Saul, it was personal, as if the light had been looking for him alone. Saul tried to lift his head, but his body refused to obey. His strength drained, replaced by a trembling he couldn't control. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the light filled him even then, burning through eyelids, through thought, through belief. A presence pressed into him, overwhelming, undeniable. Not the cold weight of fear, but the crushing certainty of truth. It felt like someone was standing inside his soul, staring at every hidden corner he had spent his life sealing shut. Then the voice came, not thunder, not wind, not human. It was a voice that knew him completely. It cut through the roar of the light with devastating clarity. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" The words sliced through Saul's defenses like a blade through thin cloth. He felt exposed, seen, undone. The voice wasn't angry, it was wounded. Wounded in a way Saul had never imagined God could sound. His breath caught in his throat. His lips trembled as he tried to answer. "Who are you, Lord?" The question tore out of him, raw and broken. He wasn't seeking information. He was begging for identity, for clarity, for something to stand on as his world crumbled beneath him. The reply struck like thunder spoken softly. "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting." Saul's heart stopped. For a moment, the world fell silent. Every arrest, every prayer, every step of zeal flashed before him and shattered. Jesus, the crucified teacher, the man Saul believed was dead, irrelevant, dangerous, suddenly, inevitably alive, speaking, claiming Saul's violence as personal pain. Saul's entire body shook. His mind fought the reality. But the truth burned through every lie he had believed. Saul didn't hear the rest of the world, the wind, the cries of his companions, the distant murmur of merchants. He heard only the voice, only the words, only the devastating realization that he had been running with righteous fury toward the wrong enemy. Light still flooded him. Every part of him felt pierced. The weight of his own certainty crushed him harder than the brilliance. He had built his world on zeal, and now zeal itself stood accusing him, not with anger but with grief. He tried to open his eyes, desperate to see the one speaking to him. Instead, he saw only white fire. Shapes moved faintly, but nothing drew into focus. His companions called his name, their voices shaking. He could not answer them. The voice returned, gentler now, almost sorrowful. "Rise and enter the city. You will be told what you must do." Saul felt the command sink into him like breath filling empty lungs. He reached instinctively for the ground, but the light pressed harder once more, then withdrew. Darkness crashed in, total, blinding. His eyes opened, but he saw nothing. Light had stolen his sight, or perhaps returned it to him in another form. He blinked wildly, panic rising, but only blackness answered. Hands seized his shoulders, his companions terrified. "Saul, Saul." He heard their fear not only of the light, but of what had happened to him. Saul reached for them but grasped at air. I can't see," he whispered. The confession broke him more than the light had. The men lifted him carefully. His legs shook so violently they could barely support him, the proud, relentless persecutor. Unable to stand on his own, the humiliation cut deep. But deeper still was the truth he could no longer hide from himself. His strength had collapsed the moment the light touched him. They led him slowly toward Damascus. Each step felt like walking into a tomb, not of death, but of everything Saul had been. Inside him, the collapse was complete. The beliefs he had guarded so fiercely lay shattered. The purpose he had carried lay in ruins. Yet beneath the ruin, something new whispered from the silence. "You have been seen." For the first time in his life, Saul felt what true surrender was. Not defeat, not failure, but the moment a man finally stops running from the truth. And the truth had spoken his name twice. The darkness did not lift when the light faded. It swallowed everything, color, shape, direction. Saul opened his eyes again and again, but the world stayed black. Panic clawed up his throat. For the first time since childhood, he felt small, helpless, unprepared. His companions held him as they walked. Saul hated the weight he placed on them, hated the trembling in his legs, hated the weakness bursting through every crack in him. The man who once marched with certainty now stumbled like a wounded child. The road to Damascus blurred into sound footsteps, breath, hushed whispers. Saul couldn't see their faces, but he felt their fear. Not fear of him, fear for him. That shift struck harder than the light. He had never needed anyone. Now he depended on strangers to keep him upright. When they reached the city, the noise of the gates overwhelmed him. Animals, merchants, shouts, clattering wheels. Saul flinched at sounds he once ignored. Without sight, every voice felt too close, every echo too sharp. The world was suddenly larger and more terrifying. His companions led him to a house belonging to a man named Judas. Saul barely remembered the journey through the narrow streets. Every step felt like surrender. When they finally reached the doorway, Saul hesitated, breath shaking. Entering meant admitting he was broken. Inside, Judas spoke gently, guiding him to a room. The mat beneath him felt unfamiliar. The air smelled of clay and oil. Saul clutched his knees to his chest. His companions whispered among themselves, confusion, fear, disbelief. Saul listened, unable to offer strength or explanation. When they left, the silence pressed in. Saul felt alone with a darkness that seemed alive, almost breathing. Hours passed. He didn't move, didn't speak. He replayed the moment on the road over and over, the light, the voice, the words he could not escape. His mind tried to reject it. A vision, a delusion, but no argument could stand against the weight of the presence he'd felt. It was too real, too personal, too devastating. The voice had spoken his name as if it had been waiting for him his entire life. Saul whispered into the darkness, "What have I done?" The question tore through him like a wound reopening. For years he believed he defended God. Now he realized he had been fighting him. The enormity of that truth crushed him from the inside. Memories flooded him, every arrest, every cry, every pair of frightened eyes. He saw them all now with a clarity sharper than sight. The believers he condemned weren't rebels. They were seekers, and Saul had hunted them believing he held the truth. He tried praying, but his words collapsed into sobs he couldn't control. Tears soaked his robe. His chest shook violently. He covered his mouth to muffle the sound. For the first time in his life, Saul wept, not from grief, but from the shattering of everything he believed himself to be. He refused food, refused water. His body weakened, but his mind was drowning too deeply to care. Darkness became a mirror he couldn't escape. Every corner of his heart he had sealed with zeal was now exposed. Every lie he told himself lay broken. On the second day, Saul could barely speak. Judas tried offering water, but Saul turned away, not out of pride, because he felt unworthy of even basic kindness. He had been strong his entire life. Now, weakness covered him like a burial cloth. He wondered if God had blinded him forever. Maybe judgment had already begun. Maybe this darkness was punishment. The thought terrified him, yet he accepted it. He deserved worse. Every heartbeat felt heavy with guilt he could no longer outrun. By the third day, Saul heard footsteps outside, unfamiliar, hesitant, purposeful. Judas whispered to someone at the door. Saul sat up slowly, trembling. He sensed something shifting in the air, a presence he couldn't name. He didn't know it yet, but another man, fearful, obedient, chosen, was walking toward him. A man carrying instructions from the same voice that shattered Saul on the road. A man stepping into the darkest room in Damascus to speak the words that would resurrect him. Saul inhaled sharply, feeling the moment approach like a heartbeat in the air. The death of Saul was almost complete. All that remained was the touch that would call him by a new name. Ananias had not slept well for days. Damascus buzzed with rumors. Saul was coming. Saul the Zealot. Saul the Purifier. Saul the man whose name made believers lower their voices and bar their doors. Ananias heard every whisper, each one tightening fear around his heart. He prayed constantly, not for courage, but for protection. "Lord, keep us hidden," he whispered each dawn. He was a quiet man, not one who sought visions or miracles. His faith was steady, humble, practical. He wanted peace, not prophecy. But peace shattered on the third night. As Ananias knelt in his small room, a presence filled the air, a weight he had felt only once before. His breath caught. The space around him seemed to thicken with light he could feel but not see. He knew instantly who had arrived. Ananias. The voice was gentle, yet it trembled through him like thunder softened by love. He froze, heart pounding. When God spoke, there was no mistaking it. Every part of his being recognized the presence that had shaped his faith. "Yes, Lord," his voice cracked. Even answering felt dangerous. Visions were for prophets, not for men like him. He braced himself, fearing the instruction that would follow. God rarely appeared without a difficult task attached. "Rise and go to the street called Straight." Ananias exhaled slowly, relief blooming until the next words fell like a blade. "And inquire for a man of Tarsus named Saul." The name struck him so hard he flinched, almost losing his balance. "Lord," he whispered, struggling to breathe, "I've heard of this man, how much harm he has done to your saints." His voice trembled. Images flashed, stories of arrests, of beatings, of families torn apart. Saul was no ordinary enemy. He was a storm sent from Jerusalem. "And he has authority here," Ananias continued, voice tight with fear, "from the chief priests to bind all who call on your name." He expected God to correct him or reassure him. Instead, silence followed, heavy, patient, waiting. Then God spoke again, firmer this time. "Go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine." The words cut through Ananias' fear like light splitting darkness. Chosen? Saul? The destroyer of believers? The thought seemed impossible, almost offensive. He will carry my name before nations and kings and the children of Israel." Ananias' breath faltered. This was no ordinary calling. This was destiny spoken with divine certainty. But how could the man who hunted them be chosen? By the very one he opposed? "And I will show him how much he must suffer for my name." A chill ran through Ananias. This calling was not honor alone. It was burden. Suffering awaited Saul. Transformation would not be gentle. God was preparing to break him open fully. Ananias sat in stunned silence. He didn't feel brave. He felt torn between fear of Saul and fear of disobeying God, between confusion and obedience, between logic and faith. The two forces battled inside him until obedience finally won. He stood slowly, hands trembling. His sandals felt heavy as he slipped them on. Each step toward the door felt like stepping into danger, but obedience had weight too. Holy weight that pressed him forward even as fear whispered behind him. As he walked through Damascus, the quiet streets felt sharper, as if the city itself sensed something unfolding. Ananias' heart pounded. He imagined Saul in the house, furious, violent, waiting to strike. He imagined death. He imagined failure. But with each step he remembered God's words, "chosen vessel." The phrase made no sense, yet rang with unshakable authority. If Saul was chosen, then Ananias' fear could not be the measure of truth. By the time he reached Judas' door, Ananias' body trembled, but his spirit had steadied. He lifted his hand to knock, hesitated once, and then knocked anyway. Obedience carried him through fear. Faith carried him the rest of the way. Inside the house he heard shuffling, whispers, movement. Judas opened the door, startled to see him. "You're here for him?" Judas asked, eyes wide. Ananias nodded, though doubt still flickered. The dim hallway stretched before him. At the far end, a blind man sat hunched over, shaking, broken, waiting for a touch he did not yet know was coming. Ananias swallowed hard. This was the man he feared, and the man God had chosen. Taking a slow breath, Ananias stepped inside, each footfall marking the moment the story of Saul ended, and the story of Paul prepared to begin. Ananias stepped into the dim room, breath unsteady. Saul sat on the floor, back hunched, hands shaking slightly on his knees. The once fierce persecutor looked like a man emptied of everything. Strength, certainty, identity. Darkness clung to him like a second skin. Saul heard the footsteps before he sensed the presence. His head lifted slightly, though his eyes, clouded, unfocused, revealed nothing. Every sound struck him sharply. He swallowed hard, bracing himself. He expected judgment, anger, fear, anything but what waited in that doorway. Ananias froze a few steps away, seeing the broken man he had feared for weeks. This wasn't a monster. This wasn't a terror of Jerusalem. This was a man undone. A man sitting in the ashes of his certainty. Compassion, unexpected and overwhelming, rose in Ananias' chest. He whispered a name he had never imagined using with tenderness. Saul, brother. The word hung in the air, soft yet powerful. Saul inhaled sharply. Brother, not enemy, not threat. The word pierced deeper than any rebuke. His jaw trembled. Ananias approached slowly, as if stepping into holy ground. "The Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road," he said gently, "has sent me that you may see again." and be filled with the Holy Spirit." Saul's breath broke. This was real. The voice in the light had been no illusion. Ananias placed his hands on Saul's head. They were warm, steady, human. Saul had not felt a gentle touch in years. Not from teachers, not from elders, not from himself. His body shook, not from fear, but from a grief he could no longer contain. The darkness inside him shuddered. Something shifted, small at first, then deep, as if an unseen lock turned inside his chest. He felt warmth spreading from Ananias' palms, sinking into places he had buried beneath zeal and fear. A sensation rushed through him, pressure behind his eyes, a sting, then release. Saul gasped as something like thin, brittle layers slid off his vision. It was painful, then strangely relieving. The room brightened slowly, shapes forming from the blur. And then the scales fell, literally flaking, shedding from his eyes like dust of his old life. Saul blinked rapidly, breath shaking, as light returned, not blinding, but clear, soft, real. For the first time in 3 days, he saw the world again. The first face he saw was Ananias, not stern, not afraid, compassionate. Saul stared at him, chest tightening. Why would this man, this believer he once hunted, touch him with kindness instead of fear? Tears welled in his eyes. He didn't hide them. He couldn't. Something inside him had broken open too far to hold anything in. I can see," Saul whispered, voice raw. Ananias nodded, eyes soft. "You were meant to." Saul tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. Ananias caught him gently. The gesture struck Saul harder than the fall on the road. Once Saul stood towering over believers. Now a believer held him upright. The reversal humbled him to the core. Judas brought water. Saul drank slowly, almost reverently. It tasted sharper, clearer than he remembered, as if even water recognized him as a different man now. The darkness that had imprisoned him felt distant, like a dream fading under morning light. Then Ananias offered him another cup, one used for baptism. Saul stared at it, understanding dawning slowly. Baptism wasn't a ritual for him now. It was burial, leaving Saul in the water, rising as someone new. He stepped toward the basin. His reflection flickered in the surface, hungry, shaken, humble. He barely recognized himself. He lowered his head, heart pounding, letting the water wash over him. The sensation felt like both ending and beginning. As he rose, air filled his lungs differently. He felt lighter, yet grounded, not empty, reborn. The room seemed brighter, larger, filled with meaning he couldn't put into words. Saul inhaled deeply, and for the first time in his life he did not feel judged. He sat back down, exhausted, but renewed. Food was placed before him. His hand shook as he reached for it, not from weakness, but from gratitude he didn't know how to express. He had eaten many meals in his life. This one felt like his first. Ananias watched him quietly, a small smile forming. He didn't see a persecutor anymore. He saw a man God had broken to rebuild, a man who would soon turn the world upside down, a man who would carry a name that would echo through nations. Saul closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the room, the presence of Ananias, the whisper of the Spirit settling inside him. The darkness had not destroyed him. It had prepared him. In that moment, Saul understood. The man who opened his eyes was not healing a persecutor. He was midwifing an apostle. The room felt different after the healing. Light no longer frightened Paul. It comforted him. Warm, steady, real. Yet the silence around him carried new weight. He wasn't Saul anymore, but he didn't know who Paul was yet. Transformation felt less like a moment and more like a wound still bleeding. Ananias stayed with him through the first hours. His presence steadied Paul, though it also humbled him deeply. A man he once hunted now stood beside him, as the first companion of his new life. It was a kindness Paul didn't know how to receive or deserve. When Ananias finally left, Paul sat alone on the mat, hands folded tightly. Every breath felt unfamiliar. Every thought felt fragile. He touched his face often, as if confirming the scales were truly gone. Sight had returned, but certainty had not. Outside Judas' house, the city whispered. People had heard Saul arrived to arrest them. Now rumors spread that he was blind. Others said he was healed. Others said he had fallen under God's judgment. No one agreed, but everyone felt something was happening. Paul could hear voices outside, murmurs drifting through the window. "Is it true?" one person asked. "Has he really changed?" Another whispered. He lowered his head. He didn't blame their fear. If he were them, he wouldn't trust himself either. His companions returned once, hesitant and confused. They asked what he had seen, who he had spoken to, what the light meant. Paul tried to explain, but words failed him. How could he describe a presence that felt like both judgment and mercy? The men left, unsure what to believe. Their footsteps faded, leaving Paul alone again. Their uncertainty struck him harder than their questions. These were men who once followed him without hesitation. Now they feared him without understanding why. Paul spent long hours staring at the floor, remembering. Faces of those he arrested, voices crying out, prayers he dismissed as foolishness. Each memory rose like a ghost demanding recognition. He did not push them away. He embraced them, letting grief carve through him. He whispered apologies into the quiet room, names he remembered, names he had forgotten, names he never bothered to learn. He wished he could undo the harm, but the past lay heavy like stones stacked on his chest. He could only weep and hope God heard. Despite the heaviness, something gentle pulsed beneath the sorrow, a soft, steady presence, reminding him he wasn't abandoned. It felt like the same voice from the light, now whispering rather than thundering. Paul didn't understand it, but he clung to it. Judas brought food, urging him to eat. Paul obeyed slowly, tasting each bite as if rediscovering life. The nourishment steadied him. Strength began returning to his limbs. But the greater healing happened inside, slow, painful, necessary. Outside, tensions grew. Jewish leaders in Damascus heard rumors of Saul's collapse. Some were confused, others furious. They had expected a hammer. Instead, they received a man broken open. Plans shifted. Eyes turned toward Judas' house with suspicion. Believers whispered too, unsure what to think. Some believed Ananias' report. Others feared a trap that Saul pretended conversion to infiltrate them. Their fear was reasonable. Paul understood that. He didn't blame them. Trust would take time. During the second quiet evening, Paul approached the window. The sun sank behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. He watched people pass, merchants, families, children, each unaware of the transformation happening inside one small room. He wondered who he would become, what his purpose was now. The voice had given direction, enter the city, but no command yet beyond that. Waiting felt unbearable. Saul acted. Paul waited. This contrast felt like another death. At night, he lay awake, listening to the city breathe. He whispered prayers he had never prayed before, soft, unsure, honest. Not the rigid recitations of his youth, not the fierce declarations of his zeal, just quiet confessions from a man newly remade. He asked for forgiveness, for clarity, for courage, for purpose, and though no audible voice answered, he felt something settle in his spirit, a sense that God was near, closer than ever, shaping him in silence. By the third day after his healing, Paul rose without trembling. His movements held new steadiness, not the rigid strength of Saul, but the grounded confidence of a man learning to walk again. He inhaled deeply. The air tasted like beginning. Ananias returned that morning. When he saw Paul standing, eyes clear, posture changed, he smiled. "The city is waiting," he said. Paul nodded slowly. He wasn't ready, but he was willing. And sometimes willingness is the first miracle. As he stepped toward the door, Paul felt something inside shift. Not the fire of zeal, but the quiet glow of calling. His days of silence were ending, and soon Damascus would witness the first steps of a man reborn. By the time Paul stepped outside Judas' house, Damascus was already trembling with rumors. His arrival had frightened the city. His collapse had confused it. His healing had shaken it even more. No one knew what version of Saul now walked its streets, or what he intended to do. Believers kept their distance. They watched him from alleys and doorways, eyes wide with caution. They whispered to each other in hushed tones. Is he truly changed? Is it a trap? Did Ananias really touch him? Their fear was not hatred, it was survival. Parents kept children indoors. Traders hushed conversations when he passed. Even beggars stared at him with wary curiosity. Paul felt every gaze like a weight on his shoulders. He had once walked cities with authority. Now he walked through suspicion. Word spread quickly through the synagogues. Saul of Tarsus is in Damascus, leaders said. But something has happened. Some elders were confused, others outraged. They expected reports of arrests and chains. Instead, they heard rumors of visions, healing, and silence. One leader slammed his hand on the table. Are we to believe he has joined them? Another scoffed. Impossible. Saul is loyal, but uncertainty crept in. The Saul they knew had never gone 3 days without sending word. The silence alarmed them more than rebellion would have. They sent discreet messengers to Judas' house, hoping to gather information. Judas said little, only that Saul was recovering. He didn't mention the healing, the scales, the baptism. Protecting Paul felt dangerous, but necessary. Meanwhile, believers debated intensely. Some trusted Ananias' testimony. Others distrusted even Ananias, wondering if he had been coerced. Still others whispered, if God chose Saul, who are we to resist? The church of Damascus hovered between fear and hope. Paul felt the tension everywhere, in the way people stepped aside when he approached, in the way voices dipped when he entered a street, in the way no one looked him in the eyes for more than a moment. Suspicion clung to him like dust. Ananias walked beside him at times, offering quiet reassurance. "Let them watch," he said softly. "They must see before they can believe." Paul nodded. He understood. Transformation meant nothing until witnessed. Still, Paul felt the weight of his old name trailing behind him like a chained ghost. Saul, the destroyer. Every whisper felt like a reminder of who he had been. He wondered if he would ever be free of that shadow. News reached the Roman authorities as well. A few soldiers observed from a distance, unsure whether this was a political matter or a Jewish dispute. Rome didn't care about theology, but it cared very much about unrest. As political eyes tightened, synagogue leaders began strategizing. If Saul had changed sides, he became a danger, not because he was weak, but because he knew their strategies, their concerns, their vulnerabilities. A former weapon was the most dangerous kind of opponent. Some leaders whispered, "If he starts preaching, we must stop him." Others said, "We must first confirm." But the fear grew quickly, fear that Saul, once their hammer, would become the fire that exposed them. Meanwhile, Paul stayed mostly indoors. He prayed, read, listened, and waited. Waiting was strangely painful. He felt called to speak, yet restrained by wisdom. His words would mean nothing if spoken too soon. Timing mattered. Every night, the murmurs around the house grew louder. Some argued, some prayed, some cursed. Paul listened with humility. It was strange to hear the city wrestle with his new identity before he fully understood it himself. Inside him, something solidified. Not confidence, clarity. The voice on the road had not called him to hide. It had called him to stand, but standing in a city that feared him meant understanding the fear, not ignoring it. On the third quiet morning, a child approached Judah's doorway. The boy stared shyly at Paul. "Are you the man who was blind?" he asked. Paul nodded slowly. The boy smiled. "My father said only God does that." Then he ran off. Paul's heart softened. Simple words, pure faith. Unlike the debates of adults, the child saw the miracle without fear. Paul felt the first spark of courage ignite. Perhaps Damascus did not need the old Saul defeated. It needed the new Paul revealed. That afternoon, Paul stood at the threshold of Judah's house. The city stretched before him, buzzing with rumors. He inhaled slowly, sensing the moment ripening. The time for silence was ending. The time for speaking was near. Damascus wasn't ready for him, but God was. And Paul felt the shift inside him, the steady rise of purpose. Like dawn pushing shadows aside, the city feared him still. Yet soon it would hear him. Paul walked toward the synagogue with a steadying breath. The building felt heavier than its walls suggested. This was the very place he planned to use as a command center for arrests. Now it would be the birthplace of his confession. His heart hammered against his ribs. Believers watched from a distance, half hidden behind pillars and market stalls. Some whispered prayers. Others whispered warnings. No one knew what he was about to do. Paul barely knew himself. All he knew was a pull inside him, gentle, firm, unmistakable. The synagogue buzzed as he entered. Conversations stopped abruptly. Elders stiffened. Some rose to greet him out of habit, then hesitated mid-step, unsure whether to bow or recoil. Paul felt dozens of eyes on him, expectant, confused, suspicious. He walked to the center, the place reserved for teachers and men sent from Jerusalem. Just days ago he carried authority here. Now he carried something else. Brokenness, revelation, truth. He inhaled deeply, as if drawing courage from the air. Whispers ricocheted around the room. He looks different. Is he injured? Why hasn't he made any arrests? The murmurs became a storm. Paul waited, letting the tension rise. The silence that followed settled thick as sand. He opened his mouth, and the first word felt like stepping onto a fragile bridge. "Brothers," the crowd leaned forward. "I must speak to you about Jesus." Gasps broke like sparks across the room. Some recoiled, others frowned. A few froze completely. Paul continued, voice trembling but steady. "Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God." The words struck the synagogue like lightning. One elder grabbed the edge of his robe in shock. Another shook his head, mouthing, "Impossible." Paul pressed on. He spoke not as a scholar, not as a persecutor, but as a man who had encountered something undeniable. "I met him," Paul said softly. "On the road, he spoke to me. He called me." His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with truth too heavy to conceal. Some listeners paled. Others whispered frantically. A few stared at him with a mixture of awe and terror. This was Saul, the council's chosen hammer, claiming to have seen the risen Jesus. The air thickened with disbelief. Paul lifted his hands as if offering them proof. "I persecuted his followers. I hated his name, but he showed me mercy. He opened my eyes." He paused, letting the weight of that sentence sink. "My blindness was judgment. My sight is grace." A man in the crowd shouted, "You're deceived." Another yelled, "Where are your letters? Your authority?" Paul answered calmly, "My authority is the one who spoke my name from the light." His voice echoed through the hall like a declaration and confession woven together. The synagogue erupted. Some argued fiercely. Others demanded he leave. But a few, just a few, listened in stunned silence, their hearts stirring with questions they had buried for months. Paul saw it in their faces. Truth had found cracks. Paul did not argue. He did not shout. He spoke as a man who had seen something too real to deny. "I came to Damascus to bind believers," he said quietly. "But the Lord bound me instead." A murmur rippled through the room. Some insulted, others captivated. An elder stepped forward, trembling with fury. "You shame Jerusalem. You shame us." Paul met his gaze without flinching. "I shamed God when I persecuted his people. I will not lie to ease your anger." His courage felt new, gentle, rooted, unshakable. The discussion devolved into chaos. Some shouted to silence him. Others demanded more explanation. A few wanted to throw him out. Paul remained calm, steady, grounded not in himself, but in the voice that had broken him open on the road. He raised his voice once more, clear, strong, unmistakable. "Jesus lives." The room fell silent again, and he is calling all who seek God to follow him. Not a threat, not a sermon, a simple truth spoken by a man who could not unsee what he had seen. Some listeners slipped out quietly, shaken. Others glared at him with violent intent. A handful remained seated, hearts pounding with conviction they didn't dare admit. Paul saw it. The seeds had been planted. Truth rarely blooms instantly. It begins with disturbance. Paul stepped back from the center. His legs trembled with release, but his spirit steadied. He had spoken, not perfectly, not eloquently, but truth had been declared in the very place he once planned to wage war. That reversal alone felt like another miracle. Outside, believers waited anxiously. When they saw him emerge alive, relief washed over them. Paul looked at them gently. "It has begun," he said, not with triumph, with humility, with awe, with the quiet gravity of a man walking into destiny. And as Damascus buzzed with confusion, fear, and wonder, Paul felt purpose rise inside him like a dawn he could no longer deny. He had spoken the first words of his new life, and the world would never be the same. Paul's first preaching did not settle the city. It cracked it open. Within hours, word spread through Damascus like sparks on dry straw. Saul is preaching Jesus. The man who came to chain believers was now defending them. The shock confused some, but enraged others. In the synagogues, leaders gathered in tight circles, speaking in sharp whispers. Paul had not merely changed sides. He had humiliated them. His transformation made them look blind. His confidence made them look unprepared. His testimony threatened everything. One elder slammed his fist on the table. "If he speaks again, people will believe him." Another hissed, "They already do." You saw their faces. Fear mixed with pride until both became anger. Paul, the former weapon of Jerusalem, was now a wildfire. Some leaders sent messages to Jerusalem demanding guidance, but word would take time to return, and Paul was acting now. Right under their roofs. "We must silence him quickly," a younger scribe urged. "If he continues, he will change Damascus." Outside, ordinary Jews argued in the streets. Some mocked him. Some doubted him. A few defended him, saying, "A man does not change like that unless something powerful happened." Opinion fractured sharply. Tension pulsed through the city like heat. Believers hid behind shuttered windows, listening anxiously. Paul had preached boldly, but boldness drew danger. Some urged Ananias to warn him. Others feared even being seen near him. Their hearts wrestled between gratitude and self-preservation. Paul continued visiting synagogues, speaking with clarity and conviction. Each message deepened the divide. Some listeners softened, others hardened. His presence became a test, revealing hearts, exposing motives, stirring what had been sleeping. After one sermon, a group of men followed him at a distance, their eyes cold, steps synchronized. Paul noticed the shift, the way silence trailed behind him like a shadow. But he kept walking. Fear had no voice in him now. The men reported back to the elders. "He grows stronger with each teaching," they warned. "He argues with precision. We cannot win." That was the breaking point. Pride gave birth to a decision they had avoided until now. "We stop him," the chief elder said. The words hung heavy in the room. No one asked how. No one questioned why. They all understood. Saul the persecutor had been useful. Paul the preacher was dangerous. A plan formed quickly, silent, calculated, ruthless. They knew his roots. They knew the gates of the city. They knew believers would try to protect him. Their strategy was simple: restrict his movement, trap him, eliminate him before he gained more influence. Meanwhile, Paul felt a growing heaviness in the air, not fear awareness. He sensed hostility thickening like storm clouds. Some listeners glared more openly. Some turned away sharply. Some muttered when he passed. He understood the pattern. Once he had inspired this very fear. Still, he continued. Every teaching sharpened him. Every confrontation deepened his courage. Not from pride, but from certainty. He had seen the truth on the road. No threat could unsee it. No danger could silence it. One evening, a small group of believers gathered around him privately. Their faces were pale. "Paul, they are plotting," one whispered. "The leaders are furious. You overturned everything." Another added, "They want you dead." Paul listened quietly. He was not surprised. Every step of his life had led him here, to conflict, to consequence, to calling. But he felt no anger toward his accusers, only sorrow. He knew their zeal. He once shared it. The believers urged him to stay inside. But Paul shook his head gently. "I will go where the Lord leads," he said. It wasn't recklessness, it was conviction. He knew danger was part of his path. As night fell, the plot tightened. Men positioned themselves near the city gates. Lookouts watched Judas' house. Messengers waited to report his movements. Their patience was cold and precise. They expected fear. They expected retreat. But inside the believer community, something else stirred. A protective unity. Whispers spread from house to house. "We must watch over him. We must help him. God chose him." Fear remained, but courage began to rise among them. Paul prayed quietly in the dark, feeling danger closing in like a tightening ring. Yet peace settled over him. Not safety, peace. The kind born not from escape, but from surrender. He knew what awaited him, and he knew God was not finished. Damascus had heard his voice. Now it prepared its answer. With anger, with knives, with gates watched day and night. Paul's time in the city was nearing its breaking point, and the next chapter of his calling would begin with escape. Not victory,